A politician's reported household wealth skyrockets by 3,500% in a single year, sparking just a totally chaotic firestorm of congressional probes, fraud lawsuits, and wild internet rumors.
Right. And, I mean, the moment you see a number jump from $51,000 to $30 million on a federal disclosure form, you just know a massive collision between paperwork and politics is about to hit.
Yeah, and that collision is, it's happening right now. Representative Ilhan Omar is currently caught in this absolute whirlwind of financial and ethical scrutiny, and the numbers here are just dizzying.
They really are.
Like House Oversight Chairman James Comer is actively demanding records because the valuation of two companies tied to Omar's husband suddenly surged into the tens of millions.
Wow.
And now investors are suing for fraud. A controversial winery tied to the family has just mysteriously dissolved.
Which is crazy timing.
Right, and critics are pointing out this glaring conflict between the family's new alcohol business and the congresswoman's strict Islamic faith. Meanwhile, the internet is just flooded with rumors.
Oh, the internet always loves a vacuum.
Exactly. Including a completely fabricated story that a man who recently attacked Omar at a town hall was, like, secretly on her payroll. So today we are digging into the data for you. We're cutting through all the noise to find out exactly how this firestorm started, what the paperwork actually proves, and how a boring federal disclosure form birthed a modern political scandal.
Yeah, and to understand how things spiral out of control so quickly, we really have to start with the mechanics of that staggering wealth spike, because those numbers are what triggered the panic in the first place.
Okay, so let's unpack the $30 million question. Back in 2023, Timothy Mynett, that's Representative Omar's husband, held ownership stakes in two companies.
Right.
One was a California winery called eStCru LLC. The other was a venture capital firm named Rose Lake Capital LLC. Now, at the end of 2023, his combined stakes in those firms were reported at a value of no more than $51,000, which is, a pretty standard, modest business footprint for a political spouse.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't raise any eyebrows at all. It's totally normal.
But then the 2024 forms drop.
There we go.
And suddenly, those exact same ownership stakes jump to a reported value of between $6 million and $30 million. I mean, that is a 3,500% increase in 12 months.
Which immediately sounds a massive alarm bell for congressional watchdogs. I mean, you mentioned Chairman James Comer, and he raised serious red flags specifically regarding that venture capital firm, Rose Lake Capital.
Okay, why that one specifically?
Well, his concern comes down to how venture capital operates in the dark, basically. The firm supposedly employs 5 former diplomats with experience across 80 different countries.
Right.
Yet it lists absolutely zero public investors.
Wait, I need to pause you there. How does a venture capital firm with massive international expertise, right, and a multi-million-dollar valuation operate without telling the public who is actually funding it?
So it comes down to SEC exemptions. It's a legal loophole, essentially.
Okay.
Private equity and venture capital firms can legally operate without disclosing their limited partners if they structure themselves carefully under certain private offering rules.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they don't have to register public investors like a publicly traded company would.
Huh.
But, when the firm is co-owned by the husband of a sitting U.S. congresswoman.
Right, that legal loophole suddenly looks like a terrifying ethical blind spot.
Exactly. Comer warned that unknown individuals, or even foreign entities, could secretly invest money into these firms, specifically to gain political influence with Representative Omar. And the public would just never know.
So you essentially have this black box of money attached to a federal lawmaker. But, and here's where the story takes a bizarre turn, a $30 million valuation makes it sound like the couple is just swimming in cash.
Oh, for sure. Scrooge McDuck levels.
Right. But the fact-checkers at Snopes actually dug into the filings, and the paperwork paints a completely contradictory picture. According to her 2024 filing, Omar's individual net worth actually sits somewhere between negative $82,000 and positive $65,000.
That is just a staggering disconnect. I mean, you have tens of millions on one page and negative net worth on the other.
Yeah, the forms show she's carrying up to $50,000 in student loans, plus up to $50,000 in credit card debt. And she just earns her standard congressional salary of $174,000 a year.
Right.
So where did the $30 million come from? Her office had to basically scramble to clarify that those massive valuations represent the full cost assessment of the businesses as entire entities.
Ah, okay.
They don't represent her husband's individual cut, and they certainly don't mean that $30 million is just sitting in Omar's personal bank account.
Right, exactly.
The actual income Omar received from these business assets last year was less than $15,000.
And, this kind of thing happens more often than you'd think with compliance reporting.
Really?
Yeah, when filling out these forms, someone likely looked at the aspirational target size of the entire venture fund, or like the total valuation of the winery, and mistakenly listed that massive number, instead of calculating Mynett's fractional, unvested equity.
It's like looking at the Zillow estimate for a massive apartment building
Yes.
and claiming you're a multimillionaire just because you rent a single unit inside it. You're attached to the building, but you don't own the whole multimillion-dollar structure.
That analogy hits the nail right on the head. But, even if it's just a paperwork error reflecting the company's total value, it kind of forces us to ask a much harder question.
Which is,
What exactly is going on inside these companies to generate those multi-million-dollar numbers in the first place?
yeah, and when you lift the hood on these businesses, things get very messy. Tim Mynett and his business partner, Will Haler, got hit with severe legal troubles. One investor, a man named Naeem Maud, sued them for $300,000. He alleged that they promised him a 200% return on his investment within 18 months.
I mean, promising a 200% return in a year and a half is an incredibly aggressive, almost reckless guarantee in any industry.
Yeah.
It's the kind of promise that usually invites immediate regulatory scrutiny.
And according to the lawsuit, that return never materialized. On top of that, a South Dakota cannabis company sued their venture firm. They claimed the firm failed to fulfill basic fundraising commitments and actually owed them over $1 million.
So they are facing multiple fronts of litigation, alleging pretty serious financial mismanagement. How did Mynett actually handle the fallout?
Well, he dismissed them as mere contract disputes. He firmly denied any fraud, and he eventually settled the lawsuits with cash.
Okay, so they made it go away.
Right. But think about the optics here. You're settling fraud lawsuits behind closed doors, while your government disclosure forms simultaneously show a massive, unexplained spike in household wealth.
Yeah, it looks incredibly suspicious to an outsider.
It does. And the timing of how Representative Omar handled the fallout makes it even more chaotic.
Because she went straight on the offensive, didn't she?
She did. She took out her phone and went right to TikTok. She mocked the controversy completely. She joked to the camera, literally saying, "Keep wishing millions into existence so I could pay off these student loans."
Wow.
She later claimed that those massive numbers on her disclosure forms were simply an accounting error, and she submitted updated forms to lower the numbers.
The problem with the whole accounting error defense is how quickly it falls apart when you look at the timeline.
How so?
Well, you claim it was just a paperwork mistake, right?
Right.
But conservative outlets like Town Hall uncovered a highly suspicious detail: that California winery, eStCru LLC, was officially dissolved just 9 days after Omar updated those forms.
Wow, they just completely shut its doors.
Exactly. Which creates a glaring logical trap. If the business was thriving enough to warrant a massive valuation, even if mistakenly reported on the form, why dissolve it the second reporters start asking questions?
Right, why kill a $30 million golden goose?
Shutting down the company in the middle of a media storm transforms a boring accounting error into a legitimate mystery. I mean, it looks like you're burying the evidence.
And here is where it gets really interesting, because shutting down that winery didn't just resolve a financial headache for them, it actually temporarily patched a massive ideological contradiction for the Congresswoman.
Yes, the religious conflict. This is perhaps the most fascinating layer of the entire story because it moves beyond spreadsheets and into personal identity.
Right. The Jerusalem Post did some really deep reporting on the theological clash created by this winery. Representative Omar frequently cites her Sunni Islamic faith as her core guiding moral compass. I mean, it's a huge part of her public identity.
Absolutely.
Yet Islamic law, or Sharia, strictly prohibits the production, sale, and consumption of alcohol.
It is considered haram. It is strictly forbidden.
So you have a situation where Mynett is aggressively pursuing profits from a California winery while his wife champions strict religious principles in public.
Mhm.
The psychological and political tightrope there is staggering.
It really is.
The Jerusalem Post noted that her absolute silence on her husband's private business ventures stood in stark contrast to her usual vocal, uncompromising stance on moral issues.
Because it creates a massive vulnerability. In politics, hypocrisy is often a deadlier accusation than financial mismanagement.
Oh, 100%.
If your brand is built on unyielding moral clarity, having a spouse selling a forbidden substance just provides endless ammunition for your opponents.
Yeah.
And we have to remember, this is not the first time this couple has navigated the treacherous waters between personal relationships, political campaigns, and financial businesses.
Not at all. Before Mynett jumped into the wine industry and venture capital, he actually ran a political consulting firm called the eStCru. During Omar's 2020 re-election bid, her campaign paid Mynett's firm nearly $3 million.
And let's break down the mechanics of how that actually happens, because a lot of people hear that and assume it's instantly illegal.
Yeah, it sounds terrible.
It does. But campaign finance law does allow a candidate to hire a spouse's firm, provided the firm offers bona fide services at fair market value.
Sure.
So technically, they are paying for legitimate consulting work, advice, and strategy.
And the Federal Election Commission did actually investigate this. They found no legal wrongdoing. The $3 million payout was completely legal.
Right.
But of course, it drew fierce bipartisan criticism.
Yeah.
People across the entire political spectrum accused them of ethical impropriety.
Because even if it strictly follows the letter of the law, it shatters the spirit of transparency. The average voter sees $3 million flowing from grassroots campaign donors directly into the household bank account of the candidate.
Yeah.
And the technical legality of fair market value doesn't matter to them at all. It just looks like self-dealing.
So, if the FEC cleared the campaign payment, and Omar's office constantly claims there is a strict firewall between her legislative duties and her husband's businesses, at what point does a spouse's private venture become a public liability?
I mean, that is the core tension driving this whole narrative. When the lines between private business and public office blur so heavily, it creates a massive information vacuum.
Right.
And as we've seen, the internet absolutely loves to fill a vacuum with wild conspiracy theories.
Oh, the internet had a field day with this one. Because when you have messy financial forms, settled fraud lawsuits, and suddenly closed down wineries, people just start inventing their own narratives to fill in the blanks.
Naturally.
The misinformation attacks on Omar became intense and completely fabricated.
The town hall incident is the perfect example of how quickly these narratives spin out of control.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. In January 2026, Omar was holding a town hall in Minneapolis. A man named Anthony Kazmierczak attacked her, spraying her with an unknown liquid.
Which is terrifying.
It is. But almost immediately, a viral rumor exploded online. The rumor claimed that CBS News reported the attacker was actually on Omar's payroll at the, quote, phony winery.
The implication being that she staged a fake physical attack on herself using one of her husband's employees to drum up sympathy.
Exactly. Wait, no, it's wilder than that. Snopes tracked this down, and it was a complete lie.
Right.
CBS never reported anything resembling that story. The attacker didn't work at the winery. The entire rumor traced back to a satirical troll account run by a guy named Jonathan Gregory.
Unbelievable.
It was purely fake news designed to capitalize on the financial controversy. Even Donald Trump jumped in around this time, tweeting a false claim that Omar was worth $44 million.
It just demonstrates the anatomy of a viral snare. You take a grain of truth, in this case a confusing financial disclosure form, and you weaponize it into a completely false narrative.
Right.
People were so primed to believe there was corruption hidden in the winery that they readily accepted the idea that the winery was also funding staged physical assaults.
It feels like it's almost impossible to separate the real lawsuits from the fake internet rumors at this point.
Which is why we really need to look at her official track record regarding ethics probes. Because despite the massive volume of internet noise, the official reports tell a very different story.
Okay, what did the official reports say?
Well, in 2021, the Office of Congressional Ethics reviewed allegations that Omar hid financial data and improperly took an advance on her memoir. The board voted 6-0 to dismiss the allegations.
Wow, 6-0.
Yes, that is a unanimous, bipartisan exoneration. They found no substantial reason to believe she broke any rules.
Okay.
Furthermore, a recent Department of Justice probe into her finances essentially stalled out because investigators simply lacked hard evidence of wrongdoing.
So you have a politician who gets officially cleared by ethics boards, but is still constantly battered by massive public scrutiny, internet trolls, and literal physical attacks.
Exactly.
I mean, it has to be exhausting. When you see her on TikTok making sarcastic jokes about student loans, you realize it's a defense mechanism. Oh, completely.
She calls it a right-wing smear campaign and just laughs it off.
Yeah.
Because showing genuine vulnerability in that environment is like dropping blood in a shark tank.
Yeah, and you see this same defense mechanism across generations of politicians. There's actually a really fascinating comparison to be made with Hillary Clinton.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Clinton, of course, famously blamed a vast right-wing conspiracy for her own political scandals back in the 90s.
Right. Right.
Today, she actually teaches a 3.5-hour masterclass specifically on the power of resilience.
Wait, a masterclass on surviving public hatred?
Yes. She advises students to take criticism seriously, but not personally. But the surreal part is how the class is structured.
How so?
Clinton films the lessons sitting in a fake Oval Office set. And at one point, she reads the victory speech she never got to give in 2016. It is a masterclass in absolute defiance.
That is fascinating. So she builds a fake Oval Office, and Omar uses a trending TikTok audio. They're using different mediums, but it's the exact same armor.
They both face an environment where the lines between facts, paperwork errors, and wild conspiracies have completely broken down, so they just retreat into a posture of sheer defiance.
It's the only way to survive the arena. You stop trying to explain the nuances of venture capital SEC exemptions or compliance form errors, and you just project unbothered confidence.
So let's bring this all together for you, the listener. We started with a headline about a 3,500% wealth spike. But what we actually found was a diagnostic nightmare.
Yeah, a complete mess.
Right. A confusing financial disclosure form revealed real, actual issues. Investors suing a venture capital firm for fraud, glaring theological contradictions with a California winery, and a multi-million-dollar campaign payout to a spouse's firm.
But that same confusing form also unleashed a torrent of demonstrably false internet rumors, staged attack conspiracies, and wildly inflated net worth claims. The truth is basically buried somewhere under a mountain of partisan noise.
We thought we were looking at a clear X-ray of corruption, but the machine is broken. We just have a Zillow estimate of an apartment building, and nobody knows who actually owns the penthouse.
And that raises an urgent question about how our government actually functions. As political campaigns, private equity, and venture capital become increasingly intertwined, how do we regulate the spouses of elected officials?
It seems like a massive blind spot in the system.
It truly is. I mean, if an unlisted venture capital firm, advised by former international diplomats, can be legally owned by a politician's husband with zero requirement to disclose who is actually funding it,
Right.
is our current financial disclosure system actually creating transparency? Or is it just providing the illusion of it?
Definitely something to think about the next time you see a massive number scrolling across your feed. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.